Hi, and welcome to the Pre-Algebra Tutor. Now, I know everyone watching this video is coming from a background where you know how to add, you know how to subtract, you know how to multiply and divide, you've had some exposure to fractions, you kind of have some idea about how to manipulate fractions and decimals and things like that in your basic math. And then you get into this topic of pre-algebra, and then after that, of course, you're going to go into Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and all this other math that follows. And the tendency when you start a course titled Pre-Algebra is to maybe get a little frightened because the title of it sounds difficult. I mean, the word algebra, it just kind of has a natural ring to it of something that maybe is difficult. Well, I'm here to tell you that algebra, and of course the pre-algebra that we're going to do here in this course, it's not difficult at all. It really isn't. It's just a bunch of rules that you have to fully understand. And once you know those rules, doing the stuff is not really difficult at all. It's just like learning a language. There's lots of rules with language. How to make a sentence, how to speak, how to make verbs and nouns and all that stuff. And you know all this because you grew up and you learned how to speak by listening to other people. Well, in this course, the pre-algebra course, and all the other courses that follow, we're going to learn in exactly the same way. We're not going to learn with a bunch of boring lectures. We're going to learn by doing problems. So you're going to see a lot of problems. And I'm going to explain the topics, of course, but we're going to have a lot of problems up here that are going to show you how this works by examples. So you're going to see how it's done by basically doing it, by following along, and things like that. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do for every section of this course is to watch the whole lesson through without pausing the video a whole lot of times. I don't want you to have a note sheet out trying to take notes. I don't want you to try to pause and work the problems in between me working the problems. I want you to watch and absorb, just like you do when you were 2 years old or 1 year old and just learning how to talk. You didn't have any note paper out then. You were just listening to everybody talk. Now, after you think you understand the topic, of course, you can watch the video again. You can pause and work out your problems then, of course. But I don't want you to do that the first way through. So what is this topic of pre-algebra anyway? I want to give you a little bit of motivation. You are about to embark on a really awesome journey because your basic math, your fractions, and all that stuff, very, very important, absolutely essential to everything that we're doing in this course and all the other future courses. But really, algebra is when you first are able to get the tools to be able to solve more complicated problems. How did people, invent the first airplane, or maybe invent the first spacecraft, or invent, anything, that could go into the robotics that can travel and go inside of a burning building and retrieve things, and anything like that in the modern world has all really been designed by scientists or engineers or mathematicians work on these things, and they all have to use math. And because of that, algebra is the very first stepping stone to being able to have those tools to do those things. And the reason it's so powerful really is because algebra and pre-algebra, they're all really about solving for things that you don't know. You always have a problem where you're trying to find the answer to some question, and so you set the problem up. You may not know what the answer to that question is in the beginning, but by solving the equation or setting up the equation that you're trying to use to solve the situation that you have, you'll find the answer. It's a really powerful tool. So we're going to start with baby steps. I'm not going to assume you have any idea what algebra is or what pre-algebra is, and we're going to take it one step at a time. Now, before we get into this section is titled Real Numbers, and we're going to talk about what a real number is and all that stuff. It's just basically learning some definitions of numbers. Unfortunately, you have to cover this in the beginning because every pre-algebra book is going to cover real numbers off in the very beginning, so I'm going to put this at the beginning as well. But before I kind of dive into the topic of this section, I want to just go ahead and say, algebra, pre-algebra, has this reputation as being difficult, in my opinion, for two reasons. Students get put off for two reasons. One, it's because algebra or pre-algebra, it's all really the same thing. So if you hear me say the word algebra, I mean, we're learning algebra in this class. It's just the building foundation for what we're going to learn in algebra. The two things that trip students up and make them think this is difficult is the concept of a negative number. You really have never used a negative number before, really learning anything about algebra too much anyway. But negative numbers, and I'm just going to give you a quick little definition, a negative number is not a difficult thing to understand. Basically, if I tell you that you have positive 3 pencils. You have positive 3 pencils. How many pencils do you have? Well, you have 3 pencils. I mean, that's what it is. You have 3 pencils in your hand. We always use those numbers, but they're always positive. We always knew they were positive. We just didn't say the word. So if I have a positive 3 pencils, that's how many pencils I have, 3 of them. Now, if I say that instead of 3 pencils, I have negative 5 pencils, the negative is basically telling me that I don't really have any pencils at all. In fact, I actually owe you 5 pencils. That's what that really means. So when you see negative numbers, I want you to think about it in terms of what it really is. It's not a magical thing that's this mystical number that suddenly has a negative sign in front and it's so difficult. It's just telling you that I don't really have that many objects. I actually owe you that many objects. So, and you think about it because that's exactly what it kind of makes sense. If I have negative of something, it means I don't really actually have it at all. In fact, I owe you that many of whatever it is we're talking about. So if I have negative 2 sticks of gum, I don't actually have any gum. I owe you 2 sticks of gum. That's what that means. So we're going to talk about negative numbers off in this course, a little bit later, actually during the whole entire course. But I want you to calm down a little bit and realize that it's not that difficult. It just means I owe you something. That's basically what a negative number is. The second thing that trips people up in algebra is the concept of a variable. You see X a lot, or A or B. You see that running around the textbooks a lot. And people open a book and they see a bunch of negative numbers and they see a bunch of letters, and it gets scary because you've never dealt with that stuff when you had your basic math. Well, anytime you see a letter in algebra, try not to get upset, try not to get worried about it. What it really is it's telling you that you don't know what the value of that number is. So we may be trying to calculate something, but we don't know the answer yet. So we assign a letter to represent what we're trying to find. Like maybe we're trying to calculate the surface area of this sheet of paper. The surface area, how many square inches or how many square centimeters would fill up this sheet of paper. If we were to calculate the length and the width, we'd multiply them together and we would get the answer. But maybe we want to write it down, and represent the area as the letter A, because let's say we don't know what the area is. So we might put the letter A, and we might use that letter in an equation somewhere, because we need to know the area of the object to calculate something else. We might represent it with the letter A. And so that letter A just simply means I don't know if it's 5 square inches of area or if it's 16 square millimeters of area. I don't know what it is. I just know that I have the area of something. So I'm going to use that variable is what we call it, the variable. So those are the 2 things that trip people up in algebra, and they're not difficult. Negative number just means I owe you something. I don't have that many. I owe you that many. And a variable is just a letter in algebra that we use because we don't know the value of whatever it is we're talking about. But we're going to calculate that in the end. And that's what solving equations is all about, trying to calculate the value for the unknown. That's what it is. So I wanted to get that out of the way because a lot of people get upset about that when they start to learn algebra and get worried about it. So we're going to cover all this stuff in great detail. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an advanced preview. Now getting to the topic here, we're going to learn about numbers, and so we're going to talk about real numbers. So let's just get right to it.